Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark the Liberty, and joining me today is...
Corey caught off guard Knockreiner. I didn't have time, my brain paused and I didn't think of a little middle section to my name, so
I could
there
hear
you
the
go.
gears turning.
Probably, they haven't been oiled for a while. They were pretty darn squeaky. It's like, I don't think they barely turned with all that rust.
Well, anyways, on today's episode, we will be discussing the cybersecurity skills gap and what the US government is trying to do to at least partially address it. Then we will discuss a little more of what the US is trying to do about this time privacy. And finally, we will end with an update on Microsoft's blocking of VBA macros and Office documents. With that, let's go ahead and creak our way in. So I wanted to start this week with a chat about the cybersecurity skills gap, which I think we've talked about a few times over the years. But it basically boils down to there are too many open job positions in the cybersecurity space for the amount of people in the workforce. So in fact, ISC Square did a study last year where they found that the cybersecurity workforce is about 65% of what it needs to be, which equates to around 2.7 million unfilled positions. And we've talked about this historically with in the context of like MSPs and MSSPs, where this is where you can help provide value to organizations that can't afford or can't find a cybersecurity professional. But it's become such a significant problem that now even the US government is taking a stab at trying to address it. So just last week, the US Department of Commerce announced a plan to help address it with the creation of what they're calling a 120-day cybersecurity apprenticeship sprint. And basically the goal of it is to promote this registered apprenticeship model as a solution to help develop and train cybersecurity workers. They listed a few other goals. They want to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility across all cybersecurity occupations. They want to educate the public on the efforts of the Department of Labor's Office of Apprenticeship and the steps it's taking to help employers explore registered apprenticeships. They're trying to recruit employers to explore registered apprenticeships as well, and they're trying to connect career seekers with cybersecurity apprenticeship programs. So let's take a step back first and talk about like apprenticeships. So I feel like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, but I feel like these aren't super popular in the US compared to how popular they are overseas. Like I know apprenticeships in Europe are widely used across a lot of different types of fields, especially in some of the more, I guess, for lack of a better word, mechanical fields, the more trade skill focused areas. But in the US, like, I mean, at least in IT and cybersecurity, I personally didn't encounter many apprenticeship opportunities back in my early days. What are your thoughts on that, Corey?
Yeah, I hear the term internship a lot more in corporate US. I'm not a master on the difference between apprenticeship or internship, but I think apprenticeships are pretty structured training plans. I mean, the whole goal is to train someone to become one day a master at it, whereas an internship is often not as structured with that end goal. I mean, I assume it has an end goal of eventually getting a job there, but it's less structured and more kind of just letting you start with entry-level work versus having an exact plan that once you go through the apprenticeship, you come out with a very specific training and hopefully start mastering the skills for that.
So you fair. Yeah. Like, a lot of organizations treat like internships are very common across the US, and like different organizations treat them differently. Like some use them as basically low skilled, low paid, or at least untrained workforce to do like the busy work on different job roles. Some organizations actually do a good job of proactively trying to train up folks during internship programs that typically, only last like a summer in between school terms. The Department of Labor, though, like, so they actually have a definition for registered apprenticeships, and it's a program that offers tax incentives in exchange for hiring a untrained or undertrained individual and training them conforming to a standard. And so for the cybersecurity one, they're pitching NIST's National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, or NICE framework, as a training model to follow. And it seems like the goal is basically to convince organizations to take a tax incentive, get someone that doesn't necessarily have any experience, do the work of training them, which is where that tax incentive comes in to make it worth it. And at the end of the day, you've got a new, trained, ready to go professional already on your team, basically. It kind of makes sense when you think about it like that.
No, it sounds like a neat idea. I guess the question is what is the tax incentive? I mean, ultimately, this is having, I presume, businesses and organizations do it, meaning this isn't an apprenticeship that the government is offering. The U.S. Department of Commerce doesn't have an apprenticeship you can sign up for. This is them encouraging, giving a standard and encouraging companies, organizations to have apprenticeships and to pay for it, like you say, give tax incentives. But I'm curious, how much detail is it on the tax incentive? Because it's already in a business's best interest to find cybersecurity professionals already through whatever means they can, whether it's internship. I feel like the tax incentives would have to be really good for a business to invest money in an apprenticeship. I mean, if they do it right, the takeaway is good because they train their own employees and they get a good tax incentive. But to me, it all depends on what exactly is that tax incentive.
Yeah, I'll admit my eyes kind of glaze over anytime I hear the word tax, and I just kind of stop paying attention. So I'd have to imagine it's worth it somewhat, because they did actually list several hundred organizations that are already a part of the program. And I mean, like you said, I feel like it works for a specific type of organization that like has the bandwidth to be able to train people to come in. Like it would be great for us to say, like, yeah, we will absolutely start an apprenticeship program, but part of that is actually conforming to a standard of training someone and like the skill sets for cybersecurity with like a potentially structured training and someone at least that has the bandwidth to mentor them through that process. And I mean, part of the issue with the whole skills gap in the first place is that we don't have enough people for all the work that's out there. And I don't know about you, but I mean, sometimes I feel like barely have enough time to get my own work done, let alone train someone else up. So I can see why this isn't a massively popular program and why they're spending some money to try and convince businesses to come on. I don't know. I hope it works, because 2.7 million unfilled positions is kind of nuts. And it's not like cybersecurity is a bad career field. Like, it's awesome.
By the way, that's a very high, horrible number. I do feel like, by the way, ISC Squared releases this information a lot. I feel like it went down a little. One of the global stats I remember for this, which I think came from them before, was right around 3 million before. So still a bad number, but it seems to have come down some, it looks like.
Yeah, in the report they mentioned it came down about 60,000 or so in that year. So yeah, making progress, but still only 65% of open positions filled is not great for a pretty critical industry.
To give you an idea, you mentioned they have a list of ones, but I was playing around and doing a search for Washington within 1,000 miles of us, Mark, or at least WatchGuard Technologies, and only 2 come up that have an apprenticeship program. One is the pre-existing Microsoft Leap apprenticeship, and another is from a company called Apprenti. But they also point out whether or not the apprenticeship program is any apprenticeship program as opposed to this 2022 sprint. And it doesn't look like either of those. I think the sprint announcement is too early to see how many of those folks are. Well, maybe you can tell me from the list you found. But it doesn't look like,
at the time of this recording, I think only a couple hours or a day old or so. So you're right.
Yeah,
it's very, very early. And it might be interesting to revisit this in 120 days and see, potentially how many organizations did join up on this one. Yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll have a chat with Prakash and see if we can get some tax money to get some apprentices in here.
Absolutely.
But I feel like anything, at this point, we need to do something to address the skills gap. And what are other things organizations can do? I know we work regularly with local colleges to try and help out and at least get kids, or I call them kids, I'm not that much older than them, get young adults bought into cybersecurity.
Yeah,
But
you used
and
the
there's only so much
pop
you can
Corey term. That I would be the ones calling them kids. You're right on, Mark. I mean, that's the one I've seen work the best. I've seen, we've done it. Our partners have done it. But you can even see it in big companies. Like if you go to any colleges, Cisco materials are often on on the list of things you can learn, because Cisco has done a good job of getting into education, into college. They offer services to help people learn Cisco specific stuff, for instance, because they know, everyone wants to do that, because even for non-security, it's heavily used in IT for networking. And the benefit to them is they're introducing all those students and getting them very familiar with the product, which, not only helps them potentially hire those students one day themselves, but even if the students work for other companies, they know and prefer Cisco stuff. So for security, I think it's the same thing. If a company really wants to help find new security talent, if they work with colleges and somehow try to get, it can't just be about your product. It has to be something educational, where you're giving them general knowledge and you're helping the college, by maybe having experts come teach classes and help out. But the benefit is sometimes you do get to use your product as an example, and that not only helps train your new workforce of potential candidates that can get a job with you. If you are a vendor of products or services, it also, you can use your stuff as a demo and it gets people familiar. So to me, I think getting involved with educational institutes early is, like you said, really one of the best ways.
Yeah. And I mean, it totally makes sense from a sales perspective too, in Cisco's case, where, if you're training up a student on Cisco and they finish up college, they go work for a company, and it comes time to buy new networking equipment, they're already trained up on one brand. Which one do you think they're going to suggest, basically? So I feel like, it's not free to for an organization to go help out in universities like that. It costs hours, it costs money, it costs potential like products to go actually fit into those classrooms. But like there is a benefit of getting folks trained up and just getting, in this case, cybersecurity out there on everyone's minds, and hopefully getting some more people to come join the dark side.
It's been happening slowly too. I used to, definitely in my day, which I am an old dude, but I guess I was, in college around 24 years ago, 25 years ago. There weren't many cybersecurity specific university or high school programs. At least some of the, and maybe it's a long tail of, because, some of the folks trying to find jobs now are maybe you're looking for more experienced folks to fill this cybersecurity skill gap. So you're looking at older employee, like not 40, but like a 30-year-old employee, because you're looking for certain levels of higher experience. There weren't lots of ways to learn about cybersecurity other than on your own back when, back in those university days. I will say the past 10 years, there's a lot of cybersecurity programs in universities. So I wonder if some of this is just going to eventually catch up as the folks that have been learning cybersecurity officially in schools start to apply for more and more jobs. And, I guess that you might have to start as entry level, but I think maybe some of the higher jobs that aren't being filled because people are looking for more experience, just naturally will start getting people that have more of that, knowledge, because they were in college at the time when there were formal cybersecurity programs being taught. I don't think they've shown up on many of the, college syllabuses until, I guess 10 years isn't that recent, but some colleges have just adopted them even more recently than that. So it might just take a while for that to catch up.
Or maybe
but
it's
it
just
needs
a matter
to,
of time then.
Yeah, it has to be a subject that has to be formally taught in schools now. It's big enough for that, and I don't think it was big enough, 20 or 30 years ago, simply because technology and cybersecurity is relatively, I know it's been around for multiple decades for us graybeards, but it's relatively new in the, human history and even technology shoot, I had to use a modem, Mark. I had to listen to this horrible sound just to connect to this weird thing called I had AOL CDs. I can still remember those. They definitely were not teaching cyber. Exactly. So it will catch up, but I guess this is a good way to try to accelerate it until we get there.
Yep, 100%. Maybe we'll check in 120 days and see if this specific program has helped out at all. So moving on, one of our predictions from, I think, 2 years ago now seems to be very close to coming true. So the U.S. House Energy and Commerce Committee voted last Wednesday to advance the American Data Privacy Protection Act to a full floor vote sometime early next week being the week that you are probably listening to this. So this new legislation is the U.S. government's first major attempt to codify individuals' data privacy at a federal level. It's 64 pages long. The framework has a number of changes designed to basically ultimately give users more control over their data. A few of the things, so it requires companies to limit data collection similar to GDPR. It allows consumers to turn off targeted advertisements, which is kind of neat. Grants protections against discriminatory uses of data, so different machine learning models that may categorize people based off of race, sex, whatever. It also reins in some third-party data collection as well, too. And one thing that was actually kind of interesting, it also includes special protections for biometric data. So companies can only collect and share biometric data under specific instances, such as when responding to a warrant or with affirmative consent from the individual. So it sounds like great on the face of it. It's this big old privacy-focused legislation that is coming to the vote on the House floor here this week as you're listening to this. But on the flip side, it doesn't sound like it's as great as it could be, and it definitely doesn't sound anywhere near what the GDPR protections provide for the European Union citizens. So some organizations like the ACLU, they applaud some parts of the bill for making meaningful progress beyond the notice and consent side of privacy protections, but they still criticize a lot of major flaws in it. So a couple examples of that. There's one loophole that requires data collection to comply with state laws, which sounds good on the face of it. But critics are pointing out that this could allow organizations and states that have banned things like abortion to continue collecting sensitive information on, like, women, as an example. The bill also includes an exception for de-identified data, so anonymized data, which, again, sounds good on the face of it because, it's anonymized. It can't be tied back to me. But the ACLU and even the FTC have pointed out that the whole de-anonymized or de-identified data thing is a bit of a myth, and it's actually really easy to de-anonymize it and tie it back to an individual. So several lawmakers also expressed concern on this specific exception, saying the bill is weak on all parts of the data brokerage ecosystem. And then finally, the bill generally preempts state privacy frameworks like California's CCPA, which actually has stronger privacy protections, including allowing California residents to pursue damages for data violations. This law would supersede that.
To me, that sounds weird. That sounds like you say. I mean, it's weird that on one hand, it sounds like there's loopholes to let state law come first, specifically for the banned abortion type stuff. So there's little ways where you can do state law first, whereas meanwhile CCPA, which is a state law and one that I think is one that is very GDPR like and is probably a stronger one, like you say, that it preempts. So it's weird how it lets some state laws come first, but it's screwing up the one that actually is pretty good.
It's even more interesting. So it's Indiana or Illinois, I think it's Illinois, has a law around biometric information and how to privacy rights around storing and using biometric information. And this new federal law actually cuts out a bit to say, that one takes precedence in that state. So they do it for some, not for others like California. It's interesting. On the face of it, it feels like preempting state law makes sense if you're going to have stronger protections across the board.
Absolutely.
Like if it's granting better rights or better protections for individuals, yes, preempt state law. But this doesn't sound like the right way of doing it in that scenario.
I
But
wonder
that
if
said,
I
like,
think,
oh, go ahead.
yeah. I was going to say, I don't know if you're getting to it, but my biggest worry here, but it's one I think I already have an answer to, is whether or not, who cares if this committee is actually making progress, whether it's good or bad. The way the House and Senate are, is this even going to pass? But it sounds like this bill has a chance. So I wonder if some of that weirdness is, in order to get it to have the bipartisan support, they had to do all the back and forth that allowed this weird, in one case, state law is good, in another case, state law is not good. So maybe it has to do with getting the support
in the House.
Yeah.
So it's got a decent chance. But interestingly, so of the people you would expect to support a bill like this, like some of the privacy champions in Congress historically, like Senator Wyman out of Oregon, and Representative or Senator Patty Murray out of Washington. Historically, they've been proponents of pushing privacy protection bills like this, but they're actually against this one because of a lot of the loopholes in it. So,
not good enough.
Yeah. But that said, like, not good enough, but is something better than nothing in this? Like, is this something we could build off of over the next 20 years? Because that's how long it takes to get anything done in this country. Or is it better to just not do a half A-worded measure in the first place?
That seems like a politic podcast, Mark, in that, I mean, you could go both ways, right? I mean, one half say it. I think you and I would agree. We would like to see federal level of consumer privacy laws. I'm starting to have issues with GDPR. There's some areas with it where I think it's overly restrictive and it's causing innovation problems without necessarily getting the protection for consumers that I think we want. But you and I, correct me if I'm wrong, we support consumer privacy. So I would like to see something federally get passed, but the political podcast would talk about the state of our country right now, where it seems like there's this 50-50 polarization where nothing's going to get passed. So if you pass something that's not good enough that you really want to change, if you pass anything, there's probably no chance of anything new coming anytime soon, unless the political, balance in this country changes quite a bit, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. So I guess I could argue it both ways. If I really didn't think this was good enough, I'm not sure I'm going to get an opportunity to have a federal privacy addendum or any new laws within the next decade. So how bad are these little exceptions? And I haven't read this in full detail. You'd have to think about it. I like that they're talking about it, though. You and I do think we need a federal level privacy-like bill. So it's a good thing they're talking about it and they're doing the compromise. Unfortunately, with all of these, the devil is really in the details.
And it's going to be interesting, too, because, again, putting on the political hat just a little bit longer, like the reason Roe v. Wade was struck down at a high level was actually striking down a precedent that we have a right to privacy is basically what it boils down to. And so if you take that over to this law, does that mean that like a state could potentially, or a company could challenge this and find this one to be unconstitutional as well too? Like it's a bit of a sketchy situation we're in right now when it comes to privacy in this country. And so I like to see thoughts of progress, but I don't have high hopes of this personally.
Yeah. I think I'm with you. And another way to put it with Roe v. Wade is a sign that at least our judicial system is trying to give more power back to states and less to Fed. And that's why some of this confuses me. It's a federal bill, and yet it's going back and forth with state power over Fed power, which preempts which. So I don't know how our Congress is. Our Congress is pretty evenly split, and it's hard to get anything back. But judicially, obviously, the judges, the Supreme Court is weighing more towards state power.
But I mean, at the end of the day, though, like this does at least, it's some meaningful progress. It's not perfect. There are a lot of loopholes, but there are some things it does get right. And as much as I don't feel like it's going to make a massive change, I do feel like something is better than nothing in this case. And maybe in 20 years, when we've all kind of chilled out collectively as a country, we can make some more progress on making it potentially better. That said, so it's going to go to a vote in the House at probably around the time you're listening to this episode. It very well might just go straight into a brick wall in the Senate. So who knows? But they're talking about it. That's good.
And by the way, cybersecurity and privacy really should not be political. We need to find a way to figure out how to secure our privacy and to help companies be protected from online threats as well. And it really should be an issue that is easy to be bipartisan about.
And I think like the good news in that area is that just about everyone, no matter what color your political t-shirt is, hates companies like Meta and the data gathering that they do. And I feel like the last like 10 years of just crap that has come about from like Meta, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, they're testifying in front of Congress, like all that stuff has kind of brought this into the forefront and maybe can get people on either side to start working together to fix it.
Everyone except for the big business that America is full of that's making money off our privacy. Unfortunately, I shouldn't say this for political, but the reason this exists is because someone who is super rich is making money off of your privacy, and they don't want to lose that. So I wouldn't say everyone hates it, because obviously someone with a lot of money and power seems to be making it harder for us to regain privacy.
That's a very good, sobering, and sad point.
Sorry.
But meaningful progress. We'll see. So last thing we wanted to chat about this week is actually a bit of a quick update where we mentioned it on the fly, I think, in the last episode, talking about how Microsoft had stopped their rollout of auto-blocking macros in Office documents downloaded from untrusted sources.
Flippity floppity, flippity floppity. Keep going. Yes. Sorry. If people were wondering why I'm shaking my head while you were talking, it has nothing to do with you. You'll find out.
Well, as of today, that when we're recording this, Microsoft has restarted their rollout of auto-blocking VBA macros in downloaded Office documents after they had temporarily paused it because of feedback from their users that their documentation really wasn't up to snuff. So they paused for a bit, revamped some of their documentation to make it better for end users to know what to do in situations where their macros are blocked. And now they are starting this new rollout of auto-blocking macros. So there's a few caveats to this. The new policy only affects organizations that have never manually tinkered with the policy setting of block macros from running in Office files from the internet. So if you have tinkered with that, it's not going to do anything. It'll leave whatever settings you currently have. If you have not touched that, like I'd go ahead and say an overwhelming majority of at least small businesses, this will at least now block macros in Office documents when they're downloaded from untrusted sources, a la the internet or web emails. And it also kind of changes how they're blocked too. So with macros for the last, I feel like it's been probably 10 years now, when you open one of them up that's been downloaded from the internet, you get that yellow security ribbon at the top. It says security warning, macros have been disabled, and you have a button for enabling content. Now you get this new red ribbon that says security risk. Microsoft has blocked macros from running because the source of this file is untrusted. And it's got a link to learn more. There's not actually a way to allow them to run in that button anymore. And I think this is overall like a fantastic step. Because like you, me, probably everyone listening to this, we know not to click that button when we get a random Word document from an email that we've for some reason accidentally opened. But it's pretty easy for folks to, for criminals to put text in that thing to say, oh, hit that button up there, enable this content in order to view your statement or whatever, and trick just everyday users into clicking it, and suddenly they've got fileless malware running on their system. So just the fact of not letting users shoot themselves in the foot, I think is a great step. What are your thoughts on that, Corey?
Absolutely, but that was their default before they rolled it back too. I guess maybe I'm being a security purist here in that they rolled it back because obviously some users were too dumb to get it, didn't understand the docs and complained, I just want it to work. And I'm sorry for those type of users. It shouldn't work because they're probably the ones that are enabling it. Like it's for your own good, friend. I know the docs may not be good. You're right though. I do like all these changes. All of these changes, the updated message, the new documentation, the way they're making it easier for the users that apparently had documentation complaints, and that's why they wanted macros to be automatically allowed. I'm glad they made the changes to fix those users. I just don't think they should have turned it off at all. I would, I guess it's if you have enough of those customers, you respond to money, but I would have told those customers, hey, we're doing this for your own good. We will update our documentation eventually so that you have a better understanding of this, and then you can make a better choice for what your global setting is. But we're going to keep auto blocking, because if you're the one complaining that it should work because documentation is bad, you're probably the one that is clicking enable too.
So to Microsoft's credit, their new docs, like when you hit that learn more link, they're actually pretty good for a untrained user. Like it starts with just these 3 bullet points of saying, what can I do with this? It says like, were you expecting to receive a file with macros? Are you being encouraged to enable content by a stranger? Are you being encouraged to enable content by a pop-up message? Like all the things that you should be thinking
great
about.
Advice.
Notable phishing. It's fantastic.
And you don't always see it like that. If we're talking about it short, we just say, hey, if you don't know, if you're not expecting this document, don't click it. That additional detail, like you said, is really good for like, I'm sure there's actually grandmas out there that know more about, that are like coding ninjas, but for the non-technical sophisticated folks of the world, that puts it in very simple context they can understand. So like I said, I agree with you. All the additions they made to it is great. I just wish I wish they kept the default the way it was through this whole period of time. I mean, it's only been a few weeks. They could have left the default, dealt with those complaining users, and still released this change to the documentation to solve the issue.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on principle, but at the same time, like just to be devil's advocate, there are a lot of people in this world that use Microsoft Office, and they probably just saw something break and freak the heck out. And I probably blew up Microsoft's lines enough for them to do this change.
No, I get it. We've both been on the support side of things too, where eventually you just have to be, okay, guys, you wanted it. Here you go.
What do you mean it blocked my access to this website because it's hosting malicious advertisements? Just let me go.
I just don't want to have to deal with it. Let me go to any site I want always. Okay.
Yeah. Oh my God. So if you do encounter one of these blocked documents, while you can no longer click that enable content button, you can actually still get around it and allow those macros to run. So like, let's say you do download a document laced with macros, like legitimate ones from like your company uses. It was just hosted somewhere untrusted. In order to get around it, you just right click on the document, go to properties. Under the general tab at the bottom, there's this security box now that basically does the same thing that button used to do. There's a checkbox that just says allow macros to run, security considerations, whatever. So you can do it on an individual document basis that way. You can also add sites to your trusted sites locations by going to your internet options and then internet properties and security tab. And you'll see a trusted sites list in there. You can add a new website in there, a new share location, whatever. And now any documents that get downloaded from there won't be tagged with this protection measure. So there are still, and of course, if you run a domain, you can set up the policy to do whatever the heck you want across your organization or even to specific user groups. Like it might make sense to lock down macros to some users while allowing like finance or accounting to have access to their own macros too. At the same time, probably makes sense to block macro-laced documents from untrusted sources everywhere. Because in theory, your legitimate ones will be passed around from trusted sources. But anyways, I think I'm with you on this one, Corey. Better late than never, but it is a bit late.
I'm glad they made the changes to the document. Ultimately, this is even better as far as the teaching. And while we didn't go into it in this detail, notice this was one of the big takeaways from our internet security report. We're still seeing, Office-based malware documents and spreadsheets using, having enabled, active content like macros. And in one of our practical tips, we mentioned from a global group policy standpoint, Microsoft does already have really good documentation on how you can allow legitimate macros pretty easily while blocking, like you said, the very specific granular detail you can go into. So there's links in our report where you can see Microsoft's, detail on how to really lock down macros in general. And I presume even that has been updated.
Yep, 100%. So actually, before we sign off today, one more thing I want to throw out there. Corey, me, and the whole team are going to be...
You're like Stephen Jobs at the end of or whoever does it now. Back one more thing at the end of the Mac keynote 10 years ago.
And this is just as good as one of those Apple reviews reveals. So Corey, I, and the whole Threat Lab team are going to be at Black Hat and DEF CON this year. So if you, as a listener, are there, we encourage you to come find us. Corey is the weird-looking tall guy. I'm the weird-looking short guy. And most importantly, we are running our Capture the Flag contest again this year in person, and that does include cool new digital badges. So we'll probably chat about more on that maybe in the next episode.
They're the coolest badges we've had too. I can't wait. I don't want to spoil any tease, but we've this is our fourth year of our fourth badge, Mark, or
I think our fourth
badges.
One, yeah.
Yeah, so they upped it quite a bit. The folks that helped us design these, including Andrew Young and his son, really cool. You'll want to see them if you're there.
If you have no idea what we're talking about, we will go into this a bit more in detail, probably closer to Black Hat and DEF CON. But for those that have been waiting for in-person hacker conferences and hacker summer camp like we have been, it's good to be back. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So hopefully...
Let's just hope there's no Omicron XYZ 24681.4 that suddenly explodes right at the beginning of August.
Thanks. You jinxed it.
Oh no.
I'm going to show up in a hazmat suit now.
Yes, I don't care. That's a good strategy. Let's go anyway.
I think like you, I'm just excited to be going in person again. It's going to be, as much as I hate going to Vegas for an extended period of time, I'll actually feel a little good about going to Vegas this time again for the first time.
It'd be nice to see the community.
So yeah, check it out and more on that later. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics or suggestions for future episode topics, you can reach out to us on Twitter. I'm at XORRO_. Corey is at SecAdept. And the both of us are at #the 443 podcast. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week.
By the way, we also take recommendations over RFC 2549, IP over A.
Carrier pigeon?
Yeah, exactly. We have a roof at WatchGuard. We'll get the message.
It's not a bad idea.